How we doing, everybody? This spring I decided to build some new, taller standards for the throwing club, and since I didn't find too much out there on how to actually make a set of standards, I thought I'd document the process and share it. Everywhere I go, I look at the standards and I notice things that I like and that I don't like, and not throwing any shade at anyone else's designs or anything like that. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and everybody's going to have their own personal preferences, but I'm pretty happy with how these turned out, so I hope you enjoy. I should mention that I am not an engineer, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a guy out here doing stuff. So here's what I made, and I don't recommend anyone else build these, but here is a detailed explanation of how to do it. So I'll try to keep this video from getting too long, but I'm going to talk a bit about my thought process that went into this design, how they were built, how they get set up, and some of my initial notes after the first couple of uses. So when I started this project, I had a few constraints. I wanted them to be able to reach at least 40 feet. I wanted to try to keep the cost under about $1,000. I wanted to be able to set them up with just one person. I have great helpers, but I'm just paranoid that one day I'm going to show up for a field setup and I'm going to be all by myself, and I still need to be able to set up the standards and break them down alone if I really had to. So that one was a bit of a tricky constraint. And I wanted to be able to store and transport them at 20 feet or less. When that's a constraint at the collapsed size, 40 feet becomes a little bit tricky to reach. I also wanted to be able to do setup and breakdown using no tools if possible. I think I got that down pretty good. I think I need one wrench and one hammer. But thinking about some general concepts for designs, there's always the boom lift, which is just the worst. I think we can all agree throwing on a boom lift is not a lot of fun. You have no point of reference, and I don't even think it's economical. I mean, you rent one of those things one time and you could have paid for most of a set of standards. So let's get away from that. Then we got the single tower, which is not bad. I thought about it, but I don't love having the cantilevered bar that hangs off unsupported on one end. And having a single tower like this that uses wires to stabilize it, no matter how you do it, you're putting wires in an awkward spot. You're going to hit it with your bag, you're going to hit it, it's going to be in your way while you're throwing. So I steered away from that one too. Similar is, the extension ladder variety. I know a lot of people like that. It's not my favorite, and the reason it's not my favorite is because based on where those tethers are, for a right-handed or a left-handed thrower, they're in your way. They're in somebody's way. So I didn't want to go in that direction either. I like the double tower design, and I've seen these with no stabilizing guy wires. That they just use sort of a heavy-duty support base, and the towers just sort of hang out up there in the air. I'm not crazy about that, because when you hit it with a bag, everything just kind of goes swinging and swaying around. So I really like them stabilized. My favorite design that I came back to here was the double tower design with guy wires to stabilize it, and I like it all just locked down very rigid. So that's where I decided to go with that. And so looking at that type of design, there's a couple of different varieties that I've seen. One would be where you've got different segments that are all assembled on the ground, pinned together, which is okay, and it definitely lets you break it down into a much smaller package for transportation. You get some good telescoping tubing, and it can all collapse down. But anything I found there, the cost became a big factor really fast there on the telescoping tubing. But also, it can take a lot of people to stand it up, and another issue. This is a little bit of a sidebar, but our other set of standards that I've used for years works this way. I link together three 10-foot pieces of EMT conduit, and it's an easy way to get a 30-foot standard. Or I can add a 5-foot extension to that, and I could get them up to 35. After a lot of trial and error and with that design, I still like it, but it has some limits. The EMT conduit is lightweight and it's strong, but it's not that strong. So it's light enough that I can walk it up like a caber at 30 feet, and even at 35 feet, but at 35, it's heavy enough to bend under its own weight. So we messed up a few sets this way, and it turned it from a one-person job into a three-person job at least. And you know, I've seen others that are taller, even you know, between 40 and 50 feet, but it just takes an army of people to stand them up. So I really wanted to avoid that. The whole approach to this design, this segmented design that I use for our 30-footers, was to make it out of parts that were readily available. So if anything got damaged, I could replace it really easily with a Home Depot run in a hurry, with no need for special tools or special custom fabricated parts. The approach to the new design that I'm going over in this video was completely different. So you might find that it's a little bit tough to replicate without access to a machine shop, or at minimum a welder. But anyway, so I steered away from the assembled segments and went towards a telescoping design. And I took a couple of cues off of the quarters, because I thought they had a really nice looking set of standards, and they sort of work this way. So I think I owe that basic function to them. So looking at the telescoping design, I considered a bunch of different materials, and I priced out a bunch of different things. It was really hard to keep it under $1,000. And I ended up with a single stage telescope. So it's got one fixed stage and one that extends out, that collapses down to 20 feet for storage and transportation, but can extend out to about 41 feet at its maximum length. The design consists of a pivoting base that is spiked into the ground. Then it has an outer tube that's a 20-foot long piece of 11 gauge 2-inch square steel tube, and inside of that is a 20-foot long piece of 1 5/8 unistrut channel that can be cranked up to the top height of about 36 feet if I leave 4 feet of overlap between the sections. And the rest of the height comes from some 1-inch 1/8 wall aluminum square tubes that fit in the top of the unistrut and can be mounted high for a 41-foot top height or low for a 37-foot top height. Thinking about the tethers for this design, I had to try to strike a balance. There's plenty of tall sets of standards out there that use tethers at the top and also about midway down the tower, which is fine for stabilizing the towers, but my issue is that it stops you from using a crossbar that's actually attached to the tower, and that's definitely my preference. So this design uses a low set of tethers that's the ratchet straps, which connects to these rings at 8 feet from the ground. So if I want to, I can still reach up and connect an attached crossbar above that point. Then it would be pretty much free to slide all the way until it reaches the eye bolts for the guy wires at around 36, 37 feet. If I was using the standards at this height, I'd definitely go for that clipped-on crossbar. Obviously that's a problem if we're going to go higher than that, so I think the next best thing is adding a down rope to tighten and stabilize that bar, and to use a crossbar that extends slightly past the towers to keep it in front. The idea was that the bottom tethers should really only be needed while raising and lowering. I intended to disconnect the middle ratchet straps that crisscross through the middle once the long tethers are all tied out. Having them running through the middle like this doesn't work too well for throwing wob and turns these into kind of a sheaf only setup, which is a drawback. I haven't actually tested them yet with those middle straps removed. For our May games, I also had a dedicated wob standard there, so it was fine for these to be a dedicated sheaf standard, and I'm a little bit too chicken to remove those straps with the rig at 41 feet right now, but I'll try it out one of these days. Everything will be fine. But let's get into the build. So the feet are made from some 3-inch by 1/4-inch steel angle and a 2.5 piece of square steel tube that can pivot here. These stake in with some ground spikes, and they have a loop on the inside that is one of the connection points for the ratchet straps, which I'll talk a little bit more about. The base stage is made from 20-foot long pieces of 11 gauge 2-inch square steel tube, and these were actually 24 feet long when I bought them from my local steel place, and they were just really sketchy to drive down the highway at 24 feet long in the truck rack that I have. So I kind of confirmed what I was already thinking, that I don't want to be transporting around 24-foot long pieces. But hey, standards could have been taller. If you can transport 24-footers, go for it. So this is the bottom end of the first stage, where we would be standing to change heights and things like that. So One of the things about the telescoping design is that you can't really bolt through it because we got the second stage coming all the way down through here. So I had to weld these little pieces of channel to the outside and had to mill the little slots into them so I can put carriage bolts there, and that's how the rest of this stuff is mounted. So we got the crank that's used to raise and lower the second stage that will have the cables running up to the top where the pulleys are at. And this block, which will have the up rope and the down rope on it. And I wanted this to be something I could reconfigure and change. So right now it's just a block of pressure treated 2x6 with everything bolted to it. But who knows, I might decide to change this up a little bit, and it'll just be as easy as unbolting from the 2 carriage bolts, and I can put anything else on here that I want. So that's the idea down here. All right, so I'm finally getting into some assembly here. I'm at the bottom end of the first stage, and this first one has got the second stage unistrut shoved all the way down through it so that I can get at the end. I've got these big old long 50-foot pieces of cable. This one I had to do this stupid thing on the end. Tried to save a couple of dollars by buying a 100-footer, cutting it into 250s, and then but by the time I put this loop on the end, I was back up to the same price. Just get 250s. And then they come with the nice factory end. So anyway, that's what's down here. And then I've got those hooked up to these little guys. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I wanted to connect the cable to this, because there's very little clearance between the 2 stages. Didn't want to do a through bolt. There's just no room for that. Didn't want to weld anything. So I made these little cups here that will fit just nicely onto the end of the unistrut, hook straight to the cable for lifting, and they slide just perfectly in and out of here. So the weight of the thing will slide it down and the cable will hoist it up. At least that's what I'm hoping. And we'll see how this holds up with time and the elements. So that cable's running all the way through the first stage, and it comes out through the pulley here and back down to the winch. So I crank that winch and it pulls this little guy up right from the bottom. The pulleys that run the cable up and down, which extends the telescoping stage, they're mounted in these little brackets. I cut a slot in the top of the tubes, trimmed the angles down to size, and then welded this whole sub-assembly into the hole. The opening in the unistrut fits around it nice and easy, and the pulley and guard are held in with just a little clevis pin that I can remove easily without tools if needed. So yeah, I crank those winches, and these guys come sliding out of here. So because the 2-stage tower only goes up to about 36 feet, these little extensions make up the rest of the difference, and I can extend them out where there's only, these are 5 foot long, 1 inch by 1 inch aluminum box tube with an 1/8 inch wall, and I can have them anchored by the bottom foot and stick up 4 feet. Or if I don't have anybody who can throw that high, I can slide them down in there a little further and leave the tower at 36, 37 feet. Up here where the top ropes go through, these little pulleys are awesome. McMaster car order. These are something I actually splurge on a little bit, and they will just never ever get tangled up here. And then I will whack one of these little 3D printed caps in here just to keep rainwater and whatever else out of here. If you don't have a 3D printer, I strongly recommend them. Yeah, so here's that extension withdrawn all the way. So it's got a second little pinpoint at the bottom that I can put that through. Spacers are pretty good, but they're not sliding quite as well as I'd like, so I think I'll do another draft of that. So it seems like something I want some spares of anyway. But at the top end, obviously we've got our pulleys here. That's your rope raising the crossbar. This will be where the top tension wire is connected, and this will be where the guy wires are connected to the ground. And so this design depends on two sets of tethers, and the first is a set of ratchet straps that gets attached as soon as the towers go up. And that holds the towers in place so that I can set up the first one and then go set up the second one and crank them up to full height and then tie out the guy wires. Before standing them up, two ground stakes go in at the right distances, and the ratchet straps get set to about the right length. The middle and the rear ones can be hooked on to the towers ahead of time, so they're there when it goes up, and then the front one just gets hooked on as soon as the tower goes up. And from here you can go around and tighten them up until the tower is vertical and snug. I like to use a post level for that step. And one word of warning on the ratchet straps is don't overdo it, because they are strong enough to pull your ground stakes right up out of the ground if you crank them too tight. So here is the crossbar. I like this skinny unistrut for this. It works super well. But I wanted longer than 10 feet so that I could put anchors on the outside of it and have it overextend past the uprights. So I had to buy a 20-footer and cut it down into 11, which is a little annoying. But then I've got the little eye bolts in there, which just make it super easy. It's set up to hook up the ropes. The blue one will go up to the pulley and we'll use to raise the crossbar, and then we'll have yellow one clip on here as a down rope. Yeah, nice quick, easy setup there. I haven't found ground anchors that I like very much to buy, so I make my own from some bent steel and these 18-inch by 3/4-inch steel spikes that are pretty cheap to buy at your favorite big box store. Lesson learned, paint these bright so they are easy to find in the grass. And for tying out the long guy wires from the top of the towers, these are the best things ever. Ken Gustafson turned me onto these, but figure 9 carabiners are a really nice way to tension your ropes and secure them. These are also good to paint in bright colors so that you don't lose those in the grass either. So here's how you set these things up. Find your spot and lay the feet on the ground. Use the crossbar to space them out. Stake them in with the ground spikes. Measure out and drive in the rest of the ground stakes for the lower tethers and the higher tethers. Lay out the ratchet straps and set them to about the right lengths with a few extra inches. Slide the towers into the bases. You can hook on the middle and rear ratchet straps, and the front ones can get hooked onto the tower, they just won't reach the ground anchor yet. Attach the top extensions at your desired length and make sure the eye bolts are facing the right way. Clip your guy wires to the outer eye bolts and lay the ropes out long and straight. You can also run the rope through the pulley that will raise the crossbar and lay it out long and straight. Clip on the top tension rope and make sure that the stopper's on there at the right distance. Run out a lot of slack between the two towers and then fish it through the top of the second tower and lay the end out long and straight. If you're flying flags from the top, now would be the time to attach them. Walk up the first tower, connect the front ratchet strap to the ground anchor, then work your way around tightening up the ratchet straps until your tower is vertical and snug. Do the same for the other tower. Now you can crank the winch to raise the telescope, but make sure none of your ropes are tied off at the bottom. I have a little red mark on the cables that tells me when it's cranked to full height, so I know I'm leaving 4 feet of length overlapping inside the tube. You can crank up the second tower the same way, just pull the slack out of the top tension rope as you go. Once you're up to full height, pull that rope nice and tight and tie it off. I would say tape over this so that nobody decides to untie it during the day. Now you can go around and tie out the upper tethers. Give them some good tension and really snug up the structure, but don't pull it off to one side. Now you can clip the crossbar onto the blue rope to raise it and the yellow down rope to tighten it. Don't forget to add the measuring tape. Hoist it up and you're in business. Our first time with a couple of helpers, this process took about 40 minutes. All alone, it was about an hour, but that's with filming it and untangling ropes the whole time. So I think the solo time should be more like 40 minutes and probably 30 or less with help. So one small adjustment that I made after the maiden voyage, since I didn't want these second stages to come flying out and go through somebody's window if I had to brake suddenly during transportation, and I didn't want to have to use ratchet straps to keep them in, I just added these little safety pins here, which are going through a hole that's already exists in these guys. Just had to drill a matching hole on the outside. Now I can pin these in, and these can't go anywhere while I'm driving, as long as I remember to take them out before I try to crank them up. Everything's great. And the other modification that I thought was a good idea here was to paint the end of them that sticks out past the truck rack, so that, you know, if I forget to put a flag on them or don't feel like it, they're still pretty visible. The only other detail I want to change right now is to paint the towers with some stripes at each foot increment to help people as they try to level off the crossbar. I usually prefer to use a measuring tape on both ends of the bar to take the guesswork out of it, but it's not always like that, and it makes me crazy to look across the field and see one side of the bar 2 feet lower than the other one because somebody with crooked vision is trying to level it off, and people are just kind of bad at it. So I like to have the height marks there to help out. So I got one of these towers fully assembled on the scale at 98.4 pounds. So a little hefty, but it's 20 feet long, about 100 pounds. It's like standing up a big caber. So the whole kit includes the 2 feet, 2 towers, and 2 extensions. The crossbar, plus the Scottish flags, of course. Then there's the bag. Inside the bag is 8 12-inch ground spikes, the red top tensioner rope, the long orange guy wires, 2 sets of 2, the blue ropes for the crossbar, the yellow down ropes for the crossbar, 8 18-inch ground stakes, 5 figure 9 carabiners, the ratchet straps, 4 12-footers and 2 15-footers, the post level, measuring tape, a hammer, and a 9/16 wrench. For a rundown on the costs, I broke this down into the major metal structure, which totaled up to about $560.03 for all of the metal. The hardware, including all of the nuts and bolts and ropes and cranks and pulleys and even the tools and the tool bag that it all goes in, the whole kit and caboodle, came out to $562.69 there. So the grand total on this entire operation went a little over my goal of $1,000. It ended up costing $1,122.72. And I was pretty happy with that price tag, considering I think these things are going to last a really long time and not need repairs very often. And just a quick side note, this is the cost of the materials that it took me to build this. I'm not counting any of my time and labor, so if you were going to have somebody try to build a set like this for you, just remember that it's going to cost more than this because their time's worth something. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk here. I hope that you enjoyed it and picked up a thing or two that you can use to improve your own setup. All about making these things better, so feel free to leave me any comments, thoughts, feedback, and share your own designs and best practices and what you think you're doing really well. I'd love to see it. So thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.